All right. Yes. There we are. Marky Billson, Tri-City Sports Now. Hey, they came out with the media poll in the SEC for football, and guess what? Somebody didn't think that the Vols were Delta Dawn. No surprise, the consensus pick was Alabama, but maybe it was how close the vote really was. You know, Alabama got 253 first-place votes in the media poll, but Georgia, who, of course, was picked to win the SEC East, got 233. Interesting, isn't it? Now, who else? Who would be the... I mean, it's not necessarily news that Alabama's the favorite, and, yeah, the pick in the East is the Georgia Bulldogs, not is the Georgia Bulldogs. Not, is you is or is you ain't my SEC East champ. No, that's not the way you do it. But Georgia, only 20 votes back in first place to win the entire conference. Not the East, but the conference behind Alabama. Interesting. Very interesting. Now, coming in as the, how should we say this, the long shot that has the most going for it. I think everybody can figure this one out. Who would, if you weren't going to pick Alabama and you weren't going to pick Georgia, who would you pick to win the SEC? Florida, yeah. And maybe Felipe Frank's great arm, but, is he a Heisman candidate? Well, I don't care what Steve Spurrier says, but probably not. Anyway, Florida, they've got 21 votes for first place. LSU is next. They've got 5. Missouri, and remember I tell you this, Missouri's the sleeper in the SEC. Getting Bryant in, great offensive line. I'm telling you, Missouri's a dark horse in the SEC, and they've got 3 first-place votes. And then, I don't know, some homer picked Tennessee. Some homer picked Auburn. Somebody thought that Joe Moorhead's humility was engaging and picked the Bulldogs. Mississippi State, that is. One person did. One guy like Jake Bentley, who came to South Carolina, remember, to win the national championship. Well, one guy voted South Carolina to win their first SEC title, okay? In Kentucky, and Stoops is a phenomenal coach, what he's doing there in Kentucky. They got 1 vote, too. The predicted order of finish: first, I'll give you the West. Alabama number 1, LSU number 2. Despite not getting any first place votes, Texas A&M number 3. Then the Plainsmen are number 4. Auburn, if you're off the turnip truck. Mississippi State is 5. Ole Miss is 6. And Arkansas, the Razorbacks, are number 7. A lot of people, I think, are picking Chad Morris's 11 to be the worst team in the SEC. SEC East, as I said, Georgia, they're number 1. Florida, our women are the fairest, our men are the squarest. They're number 2. Missouri, and I might have been inclined to vote Missouri number 2, by the way. Missouri number 3. South Carolina number 4. Tennessee number 5, not surprised there. Number 6, Kentucky. And number 7, Vanderbilt. And now you vote Vanderbilt number 7. It's just like you vote VMI, well, number 9 in the SoCon poll. Except for me, I voted them number 7. Maybe I got the V schools mixed up. Virginia Military and Vanderbilt. I don't know. I just think that, Vandy is going to probably win a couple of maybe Vandy will, even though they don't have Kyle Shermer. But I think VMI will win a couple of shootouts this year. I just sort of, have a feeling that's going to be the case. Anyway, those are the SEC standings, the release coming out of Media Days. A lot of interesting stuff coming out of Media Days. And this is something that Connor O'Gara writes about. And he said there were the 5 takes that he took coming out of Hoover, Alabama. And one was just Alabama's arrogance. And we didn't have a whole lot of Nick Saban quotes that we played either. But, national championship game last year was Clemson 44 and Alabama 16. That wasn't really close. Remember after Clemson routed Notre Dame, you had all the SEC homers. Notre Dame doesn't belong in the college football playoff. And then, yeah, they actually came closer to beating the Tigers than the Crimson Tide did. 27 points to 28. I guess Alabama didn't deserve it either. The thing is, Trevor Lawrence and company, they were just that good. And Clemson's won a national title in 2 out of the last 3 years. And the ACC is kind of creeping up on the SEC, although I wouldn't necessarily. I did think they were the better conference in 2016, year in, year out, or, last year, even with the national champion. I'm not 100% sure about that. But they're competitive. No slouches. Nothing that anyone in the South should think great superiority on. I'm speaking, of course, of the Clemson Tigers and the strength of the ACC. But, there was no Clemson was the better team. It was Nick Saban talking about the distractions of his team. And Dylan Moses even tried to come out and say he didn't think that Clemson was the best team last year. And, you had a lot of that sort of arrogance surrounding the Crimson Tide. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of way back when in my youth, I remember reading stories about SMU. And SMU had just lost a football game. And forgive me, I've forgotten the opponent. I want to say the opponent was Arizona State, but I could be off on that. Anyway, SMU lost 30-0. And their players would come out and say, geez, we just let them get off the hook. It just got by us. And then came the death penalty. Yeah. Just not in tune with what's going on. Or I've told this story before many times, but under Paul Hamilton 20 years ago. And this is just the ETSU mindset of everything is roses, everything is wonderful, and it doesn't matter if we're on a 37-game losing streak, everything continues to be great. In 1999, ETSU's football team started 5-2, but then they had to play Georgia Southern, powerhouse, and they fell at the Mini-Dome by the score of 55-7. And in the locker room afterwards, as the team's record fell to 5-3, the players weren't talking about regrouping. They weren't talking about, well, we got to get this one by. And, focus on the next opponent. That's what you do. We got our butts handed to us, but we're better than this, and we'll rebound for next week. No. After a 55-7 loss, ETSU was talking about, because the record was 5-3, going 8-3. Even though they had an FBS, I think it was still Division 1A back then, opponent to play at the end of the year. Made no sense. Predictably, ETSU then lost 2 of their final 3 games and only finished 6-5, not the 8-3 that in a 55-7 defeated locker room they were talking about. Is that Alabama? Well, the Georgia fans, the LSU fans, they want to say that. Heck, the Tennessee fans do. They got to take that drubbing every third Saturday in October, the way it's been. So that was a surprise. Maybe Alabama still thinking they're the national champ. On the flip side was Joe Moorhead. And we talked a little bit about this. I can replay the line from there. Just how he said, boy, our expectations, they were inflated and such. Here, listen to him speak of his inflated expectations with the Mississippi State Bulldogs.
I'm not saying I'm changing what our goals are, but the approach of coming off the plane, guns blazing, talking about, ring sizes and Heisman trophies and, the expectation level of the team entering the season, prior to me even getting there. And I think what I did with that, without knowing kind of the history and the context of how difficult it is to win in this league, and specifically Mississippi State, where there's 2 10-win seasons in school history, and two championship appearances, one in '98 and one before World War II in '41. And I think what I may have done is elevated the expectation level to a point where nothing that we did short of a championship was going to make people happy. And I wouldn't have changed the goals, but I probably would have kept it a little bit more in-house.
All right, boy. You know what? If you're a Tennessee fan, I think you wish that Joe Moorhead would have been a more prominent coach, say, 11 years ago. And I say that because then, who knows, maybe he could have been the Tennessee coach instead of Lane Kiffin. Well, that probably wasn't going to happen. But my point being, listen to the humble pie and compare that to 10 years ago when Lane Kiffin got the job. And all they could talk about in the press conference was beating Florida. Maybe you ought to do it before you talk about it. And that's what Joe Moorhead is talking about. And that's why Matt Hayes hears the Tennessee chatter, but he says, just like I do, you know, you're not elite anymore. Why are you talking about it? 5-7 after 4-8. Now, one of the refreshing things, the SEC, you know, without a Steve Spurrier in it anymore, it's kind of gotten a little bland. There aren't the great quotes, but Lamical Perrine, a running back at Florida, saying that, hey, Tennessee isn't a rivalry anymore. But however, not doing any trash talk to Georgia. Hey, they're our rival. We don't want to give them any bulletin board material. Very telling on who the Florida Gators respect and who they don't. Well, that means Tennessee will be fired up to beat them, right? Say what you will about the duck and the truck, but it's only happened once in the last 14 years, and not a whole lot since 1993. This could be a quarterback year in the SEC. I mean, look at it. I was telling you about the one guy who picked South Carolina, and maybe that's Jake Bentley's biggest fan, but he's one of the better ones. You know, Jared Guarantano, I get on him, but his touchdown-interception ratio was 12-3 last year. But still, he's not cracking the upper half of these SEC quarterbacks. Quite telling. So that's what you take from the SEC media days that have just concluded in Hoover, Alabama. Again, Alabama selected to win the conference by the media. Georgia, the SEC East preseason favorite. No surprise there. Tennessee did get one number one vote, but yeah, out of more than 500 votes, what does it all mean? If there was a team that was expected to do, be the third place team, Florida, and LSU and Missouri also expected to have strong years, at least if you go by first place votes. So, there you have it. Missouri, of course, still waiting on their appeal if they can actually win the SEC East or not. I'll have more quotes coming up, football news, and all Josh Brown at 1:30 Tri-City Sports Now.